"You old woman, go live your own life. Leave us alone." My son shouted those words right there in front of our neighbors. I stayed silent, but my eyes said everything. 3 days later, he received a letter. By then, I had already left the country, but before I went, I left behind a note that shattered him completely. He screamed those words in broad daylight, right on the sidewalk, as the neighbors peeked through their windows. Some even stopped watering their lawns just to listen. "You old woman, go live your life. Leave us alone." His voice echoed down the street like a slap across my face. I stood still, gripping the handle of the floral tote bag I had sewn 15 years ago. I didn't cry then, but my eyes said it all. Something inside me had just died. 3 days later, my son Jacob received a certified letter. When he opened it, his face went pale. I had left the United States, but before I did, I left a letter that completely broke him. If you're wondering what could drive a mother to do something like that, to disappear from her son's life at 68 years old, stay with me, because this story might make you question everything you think you know about family. Before we go on, if you enjoy true stories like this, stories that show it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Here, I don't tell stories of victims. I tell stories of women who chose to stand back up. My name is Teresa, and I need to go back in time, so you'll understand why I stood there on that sidewalk, listening to my only son call me an old woman, as if I were just some piece of junk cluttering his living room. I was a seamstress. I learned from my mother how to sew straight lines and turn scraps of fabric into something beautiful. When my husband, David, died in a motorcycle accident, I was 32, and Jacob was only 6. It felt like the world had collapsed. I still remember the funeral, the smell of white lilies making me nauseous, the weight of holding my little boy's hand while people whispered, "Poor thing, so young and already a widow." But I refused to be pitied. I wanted to be strong. I took my mother's old sewing machine, placed it in the middle of the living room, and started taking sewing jobs, party dresses, school uniforms, clothing repairs. I worked until my hands went numb, until my eyes blurred from the tiny stitches. Jacob grew up beside the hum of that sewing machine. He did his homework right on my cutting table. Sometimes all we had for dinner was rice and eggs, but our house was never short on love. I used to tell him, "Son, we may not have much, but what we have is ours, and no one can take your dignity away." Over time, business got better. I opened a small workshop and hired 2 young women to help. It wasn't fancy, but it paid the bills and gave us comfort. My only dream was to see my son graduate, wearing a cap and gown, holding the diploma I never got to have. I had to leave school early to get married, and so did David. But Jacob would be different. When he was accepted into a business management program, I cried all over the acceptance letter. It was a private university, and tuition was $3,750 per month for 4 years. I calculated it about $180,000 in total. I didn't have that kind of money, but I did have a 2-bedroom apartment my mother left me when she passed away. The apartment was small but in a good neighborhood. I sold it, used every penny to pay for his tuition. I moved into a rental house, but my heart was full of happiness because I believed he'd have a bright future. And he did. Jacob graduated, found a job at a logistics company, and earned a stable income. He lived with me until he was 28. We had a wonderful relationship. He'd take me to the movies, sit beside me watching TV shows, and call me my queen. I still remember the day he brought home a box of chocolate truffles and said, "Mom, everything I have today is because of you." I kept those words like treasure. But then, Patricia appeared. She came into Jacob's life like a storm. Beautiful, I'll give her that. Straight hair, manicured nails, designer clothes. She was a manager at a cosmetics store. When Jacob introduced her to me, I tried to be warm. I made chicken pot pie, set the table with my best lace cloth, one I had crocheted by hand. But Patricia barely touched her plate, fiddling with her phone instead, and said with a smirk, "Jacob told me you sew for a living? That's cute." Her tone wasn't admiration, it was mockery. I swallowed my pride and smiled. After all, she was the woman my son loved. All I wanted was for him to be happy. 2 years later, they got married in a wedding I helped pay for half the cost, $18,000. Patricia wanted everything luxurious: the venue, the imported gown, the decorations. I agreed, because it was my son's special day. But after the wedding, things began to change slowly, but unmistakably. At first, it was the visits. Whenever I called to stop by, Patricia always had an excuse. Today's not a good time. The house is messy. We're tired. Jacob just stayed silent. He started calling me by my name instead of Mom. Small thing, maybe, but it pierced my heart. Then my granddaughter, little Melissa, was born. She had the same brown eyes as Jacob. When I heard the news, I wanted to stay at the hospital to help, but Patricia said her own mother would take care of things. There was no space for me. I held back my tears and waited. When I finally met Melissa 3 weeks later, I held her in my arms and promised to be the best grandmother in the world, but Patricia never gave me that chance. From then on, every visit had to be scheduled. No surprises. I had to call first, confirm the time, like making a doctor's appointment. Many times I showed up, and Patricia would say Melissa was sleeping, or sick, or not in the mood. I'd go home, carrying the handmade doll I'd sewn for her, still untouched. But the worst part hadn't happened yet, and that's what led to that fateful day, the day my own son humiliated me on the street. To understand that shock, you need to know what came before. It was about money. People say, don't judge a book by its cover, and they're right. To others, I was just a retired woman renting a small house in the suburbs. They thought I spent my days watching TV and watering plants, but inside, I carried a lifetime of struggle. I had built everything from nothing. After David died, I had no one to rely on, no family help, no financial aid. Just me, my sewing machine, and the determination to raise my son right. I remember that first year after David passed. I woke up at 5 a.m., brewed coffee, made toast, woke Jacob, dressed him in the pedicure, school uniform I'd sewn myself because buying one was too expensive. I took him to school, came home, and worked all day. When he slept, I kept sewing late into the night. My fingers bled, my back ached, but I never stopped. I had a goal. I'd watch him sleeping and think, you'll have a better life than me, you'll study, you'll make something of yourself. As time passed, the workshop grew. I rented a space about 400 square feet, hired 2 helpers, Linda and Joe. We sewed uniforms, dresses, and outfits for local stores. It wasn't a big business, but it fed 3 families. Jacob grew up surrounded by the sound of the sewing machine, the smell of new fabric and thread. Every night, I told him real stories instead of fairy tales, stories about his grandfather, a bricklayer who never stole a single brick, and his grandmother, who raised 5 children washing clothes for others. I wanted him to understand the value of honest work, and I think he did. He was affectionate, hugged me every night before bed, told me my soup was the best in the world when he was sick. Those little things meant everything to me. Jacob grew up kind, responsible, and smart. I was so proud I could burst. When he got into college, majoring in business management, he said he wanted to work in a big company, wear a suit, have a solid career. I supported him, buying expensive prep books even when it strained the budget. When he got his acceptance letter, he ran home yelling, "Mom, I got in!" We cried together, called Linda and Joe to celebrate. They brought cake and soda. It was one of the happiest days of my life. But reality hit soon after. Private university. Tuition $3,750 per month, for 4 years plus books, transport, meals, almost $180,000 total. I didn't have that. The shop made enough to live, not enough to save that much. I looked at my son, at the excitement in his eyes, and then I thought of the 2-bedroom apartment my mother had left me. It was worth about $200,000. I didn't hesitate. I sold it. When I told Jacob, he panicked. "Mom, don't do that. You'll have nothing left." I held his hand and said, "This apartment is made of bricks, son, but you're made of dreams, and dreams are worth more." We both cried. I sold the apartment for $195,000, paid all his tuition up front for a discount, and kept a little for emergencies. I moved into a small rented house with a dirt yard and an apple tree. Jacob graduated and started his own life. The graduation ceremony was in a packed auditorium. I sat in the very back, alone, but when they called his name and I saw him walk across the stage in his black gown, smiling from ear to ear, I knew every sacrifice had been worth it. Every sleepless night, every needle prick, every penny saved, it all meant something. He soon found a job, starting as an assistant at a logistics company, and worked his way up. His salary grew from about $36,000 a year to $42,000. He bought a used white car and still lived with me. He helped pay rent and went grocery shopping with me. Our life was simple but full of warmth. Every month, we went to the movies. He loved action. I loved comedies, so we took turns choosing. Afterward, we'd stop by a diner for chicken pot pie and soda. Those small moments filled my heart. He called me my queen, promised he'd buy me a house one day, take me to the beach, and care for me when I got old. And I believed him completely. Until he met Patricia. They met at a barbecue hosted by his coworkers. That night, he came home with a different look in his eyes. "Mom, I met an amazing woman." He blushed as he said it. "She's smart, beautiful, and knows exactly what she wants in life." I was happy for him. He deserved love. I only hoped to meet her soon. But from the moment I did, I felt something tighten in my chest. When Patricia came over, I cleaned every corner of the house until it sparkled. I baked chicken pot pie, rice pilaf, and made vanilla custard pudding. On the table, I spread my white lace tablecloth embroidered with blue flowers, arranged fresh roses, and sprayed a hint of perfume to make a good impression. When she walked in, her eyes darted around quickly, sharp and assessing. She was undeniably beautiful, long, shiny hair, flawless makeup, designer clothes, high heels for a Sunday lunch. She shook my hand lightly, as if touching something that might dirty her, and said, "Hi, Teresa." "Oh, I guess I can just call you Teresa, right?" "No need for Mrs." We sat down. I tried to chat about the food, telling her the recipe came from my mother. Patricia cut a tiny bite, pushed it with her fork, and said, "Cute." "Jacob said you're a seamstress? That must be exhausting." Her tone wasn't kind, it dripped with superiority. The lunch was heavy and quiet. She barely ate, too busy scrolling on her phone. Jacob tried to keep conversation going, but she barely replied. After they left, I washed the dishes with a heavy heart. I told myself she was just shy, that it would get better next time. But it didn't. Every time we met, I felt more and more like Patricia saw me as an obstacle, an outdated relic taking up space. Worse, Jacob began to change. Slowly, but clearly. He stopped calling me Mom. He stopped sharing his day, stopped asking how I was. I tried not to let it hurt. I told myself it was just a phase. But it wasn't. And then came the wedding, the day everything turned to hell. The ceremony was beautiful, I won't deny it. Held in a grand hall with crystal chandeliers and tables covered in white and gold roses so elegant it made me dizzy. I wore my one navy blue dress, tight low heels, and still felt proud. My son was starting his own family. What could make a mother happier? Patricia walked down the aisle in her imported wedding gown that cost $12,000. She made sure everyone knew it. The cake was 5 tiers high. The menu had salmon and lobster, things I had never even tasted. And I had paid half the bill, $18,000 money I had saved from sewing clothes, selling embroidery, and counting every coin at the grocery store. But I still gave it, because that's what mothers do. On the wedding day, Patricia barely looked at me. She hugged her parents, took hundreds of photos with her friends, and with me just a cold nod. Jacob tried to pull me in for a picture, but Patricia frowned. "Jacob, later. Right now, these are just for us." And he agreed. I stood there, clutching my small purse, feeling my heart crack in two. But I still smiled, still clapped, because it was their happy day, not mine. After the wedding, they moved into a luxury apartment complex with a pool, a balcony, and a barbecue area. On the first day, Jacob called me, "Mom, come see our new place." I was overjoyed and brought a warm carrot cake, carefully wrapped in foil. When I arrived and rang the bell, Patricia opened the door wearing a robe, looking tired. "Oh, Teresa, didn't Jacob tell you we already had plans today?" I froze. "But he called yesterday and invited me." She sighed. "Well, plans changed. Today's not a good time." Jacob appeared behind her, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry, Mom. I forgot we already promised to have lunch with Patricia's parents." I stood there, holding the cake that was already cooling down, and said softly, "It's fine. I'll just leave it here." Patricia took it without a thank you and shut the door. I walked home, my throat tight with pain. From that day on, every visit had to be scheduled. I couldn't just call and say, "I'll stop by for a bit." I had to ask, confirm, and wait for approval like making a doctor's appointment. And even then, Patricia often had excuses. "The house is a mess. Today doesn't work. Jacob's tired." Those days never came. I began to feel like something forgotten, unneeded, unseen. Then Patricia got pregnant. I cried tears of joy. I was going to be a grandmother to sew little clothes, tell bedtime stories, and hold my grandchild in my arms. I started making tiny cotton dresses, crocheting soft blankets, little wool hats. I placed everything neatly inside a pink gift box, waiting for the day I could give it to them. But when baby Melissa was born, I wasn't allowed at the hospital. Patricia said her mother would be staying to help, and there wasn't room for me. "Too many people would just be overwhelming, Teresa. I'm sure you understand." I nodded, but my heart broke. 3 weeks later, I finally got to visit. I arrived with the pink box, my hands trembling. Patricia took it without opening it and said, "She's asleep. Better not hold her, or you'll wake her up." I sat on the couch, staring toward the bedroom door, imagining my granddaughter's face. An hour passed, but no one called me in. I left without ever holding her. Every visit after that was the same. Each time I asked to come over, Patricia had a reason. "She's got a fever. She's cranky. She's at my mom's." When I was finally allowed to visit, it was never longer than 30 minutes. And Patricia always stood nearby, arms crossed, like a guard. Once, I gave Melissa a handmade rag doll. I'd spent 2 days sewing yellow yarn hair, a blue floral dress, tiny red shoes. Melissa hugged it, ran around the living room laughing, and my heart overflowed with joy. But the next time I came, the doll was gone. I asked about it, and Patricia shrugged. She got bored. I donated it like trash. That night, I cried into my pillow until it was soaked. Jacob, he did nothing. He agreed with everything his wife said. When I tried to talk to him, he cut me off. "Mom, Patricia's right. We need our own space." At least back then, he still called me Mom, but his tone was cold, distant. I started to feel invisible. Then came Melissa's 4th birthday. I waited for an invitation that never arrived. A week before, I called. "Sweetheart, what time's the party? I'd like to buy her a gift." Silence. Then Jacob said, "Mom, we're just keeping it small, just a few of her classmates, nothing big." I wasn't invited to my own granddaughter's birthday. I sat frozen in my kitchen as the smell of corn cake filled the air from the oven, but I felt nothing, just emptiness. 3 days later, I saw photos online. The party was at a play center with slides, a ball pit, and Frozen-themed decorations. Over 50 guests. Patricia's parents smiled brightly, Jacob's friends took selfies, and me no one mentioned. That day, something inside me cracked. I realized it wasn't forgetfulness. They were deliberately cutting me out of my son's life, and he was letting it happen. I asked Jacob to meet me at a shopping mall since I couldn't visit his home without permission. We sat in the food court, each holding a cup of bland coffee. I said, "Son, I feel like you two don't want me in your lives anymore." He avoided my eyes. "That's not true, Mom. Patricia just thinks you get a little too involved." Too involved? I wasn't even allowed to see my grandchild. "Still," I asked calmly, "and what about you? What do you think?" Jacob stayed silent. That silence said everything. He had chosen her side. I went home with a hollow ache. My son was lost to me, and I didn't know if I'd ever find him again. But the worst was still to come. 3 months after that talk, Jacob showed up at my door with Patricia, and they came for money. I was watering the plants when the doorbell rang. There they were, both dressed nicely, smiling. Jacob held a paper bag. "Mom, we brought cheesecake, your favorite." They hadn't visited in months, and now they showed up with smiles and dessert. I knew something was wrong, but I still welcomed them in. I made coffee, set the cake on the kitchen table, and we sat down. Patricia seemed unusually sweet. "Oh, Teresa, your house is so cozy. That coffee smells amazing. It's the simple things in life we forget to appreciate, isn't it?" She had never complimented anything in my home until that day. They sat there acting cheerful, chatting as if nothing had happened. Jacob ate 2 slices of cheesecake, drank his coffee, and talked about the weather, work, and Melissa. Then Patricia nudged his elbow subtle, but I noticed. Jacob cleared his throat. "Mom, actually, we came because there's something we want to discuss." My chest tightened. "Go ahead, son." He glanced at Patricia. She smiled encouragingly. Then he said, "I've got an amazing investment opportunity. A friend from work is expanding a frozen smoothie franchise and looking for partners. It's a solid business, Mom, high profits. He already has 3 stores and wants to open more." I stayed silent, waiting. "The startup cost is about $95,000. We've saved some, but we're still short. We were hoping, maybe you could lend us the rest?" I froze. That was nearly my entire savings, my emergency fund, money from selling leftover fabric, doing small sewing jobs, saving every dollar. It was my safety net. "Son, that's a lot of money." "I know, Mom, but it's just a loan. We'll pay you back in 6 months with interest. You'll get $105,000. We'll make a formal contract." Patricia leaned forward with a fake smile. "Teresa, we wouldn't ask if it weren't a real opportunity. We trust Jacob." "Don't you trust your own son?" That was the trap. If I said no, I'd be the bad mother, selfish, distrustful, hoarding money instead of helping family. I looked at Jacob, the boy I'd raised. Alone, fed, clothed, sold my only apartment just to pay for his education. I looked into his eyes and saw a stranger, though deep down I still glimpsed the 6-year-old boy who once cried in my arms after his father died. "Let me think about it, son." Patricia frowned. "Think about it, Teresa. Opportunities like this don't wait. If you hesitate, someone else will take it." Jacob squeezed her hand, signaling her to stop, then turned to me gently. "Mom, I wouldn't ask if I didn't need to. You've always said you want to see me succeed, right? This is my chance." I took a deep breath and made the biggest mistake of my life. "All right, I'll lend it to you." Patricia's smile widened in triumph. Jacob smiled softly, relieved. He stood up and hugged me. "Thank you, Mom. I promise you won't regret this." 3 days later, I wired them $95,000. Patricia prepared and printed the contract. Loan amount, $95,000. Repayment in 6 months with 10% interest, total $105,000. The 3 of us signed. I stored my copy in a drawer, uneasy. For the first 2 months, they acted kind. Jacob called every week to check in. Patricia even sent pictures of Melissa. I pretended everything was normal, replying with little heart emojis. But by the 3rd month, things changed. Jacob called less often, always rushed. "Mom, I'm busy. I'll call back." He never did. By the 4th month, I was worried. Not about the money, but about the distance. They had what they wanted, and I was invisible again. Then came the 6th month, the repayment deadline. I waited, not wanting to pressure him. A week passed, then 2. 15 days later, I called. Jacob answered, voice flat. "Hi, Mom. Son. It's been over 6 months since the loan." Silence. "Mom, business is fine, but profits haven't started yet. Can you give us a little more time?" "How long?" "Not." Sure, maybe 3 months. 3 months became 6, then 8. Every time I asked, Jacob had a new excuse. We're restructuring. I had to reinvest. When I asked Patricia, she laughed. Teresa, you worry too much. Businesses take time to grow. Relax. Relax. I had given them nearly everything I owned, and they told me to relax. 8 months later, I learned something that broke me completely. I was buying vegetables at the market when my neighbor, Helen, said, Teresa, I saw your son the other day. That new car of his, wow, so shiny. A brand new Toyota, black as midnight. I froze. A new car? Yeah, parked right in front of his building. I saw it with my own eyes. I went home and opened Facebook, the account I used, only to see photos of my granddaughter. And there it was, a picture of Jacob standing proudly beside a black car, smiling, with the caption, New Achievement, Thank God. I looked up the price, around $28,000. They had bought a car with my money. My heart clenched. I sank to the kitchen floor, leaning my head against the wall as tears poured down. It wasn't just about the money, it was betrayal, a deliberate lie from the son I'd sold my home to raise. The next day, I called him. Jacob, I saw the picture of you and the car. Silence. So what? So what? You owe me $95,000. How can you buy a $28,000 car? Mom, it's financed. What I do with my money is my business. Your money? That was my money. But you promised to repay in 6 months. I will. Stop pushing me. You're acting like some loan shark. He called me a loan shark. I hung up, sat still, and listened to the ticking of the clock in the empty kitchen. Each tick pierced like a knife. I realized this wasn't just disrespect, it was cruelty. For 3 days, I couldn't eat. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, remembering every night I stayed up, sewing, every meal I skipped for him, and now he called me greedy. I told myself maybe it was anger, that he'd call to apologize, but weeks passed, nothing. One Saturday morning, I decided to find him. I didn't tell anyone. I took the bus to his apartment complex. The security guard recognized me. Good morning, Mrs. Teresa. Here to see Jacob? I forced a smile. Yes. He called upstairs, no answer, even though Jacob's car was parked below. I'm his mother. Please, let me go up. The guard hesitated, then nodded. My legs trembled in the elevator. The doors opened on the 5th floor. I rang the bell. Inside, I heard laughter, a TV. I rang again. Patricia opened the door wearing workout clothes, hair tied up, no makeup. When she saw me, her face turned cold. Teresa, what are you doing here? I want to see Jacob. He's busy. Just 5 minutes. She sighed and called over her shoulder. Jacob, your mother's here. Her voice dragged out, the word mother like it was something heavy. Jacob came out wearing a t-shirt, looking half asleep. Mom, why didn't you call first? Son, I need to talk. He glanced at his wife, who crossed her arms, still blocking the doorway. The 3 of us stood there. I felt like an unwanted salesman. Son, it's been 8 months. You said 6. Jacob sighed. Mom, I told you, the money's tied up in investments. I can't take it out, but you just bought a car. I explained it's financed. Jacob, I lent you everything I had. I need that money to live. Patricia interrupted. Teresa, we have expenses too. We have a kid. You think raising a child is easy? Everything costs: school, clothes, doctors. You need to stop being so selfish. Selfish? My face burned. I just want what's mine. What's yours? Patricia laughed. You lent your son money, not a stranger. Don't make him feel ashamed because you're nagging. You're embarrassing him. I looked at Jacob, waiting for him to speak up to defend me, but he just looked down, said nothing. In that moment, something inside me shattered. All right. I'm sorry for bothering you. I turned away, hearing the door slam shut behind me before I reached the elevator. I walked out to the bus stop, sat on the wooden bench under the blazing sun, and understood I was no longer a mother. I was just a lender, a number on a piece of paper. 3 days later, the worst happened. It was Thursday. I was sweeping the sidewalk in front of my house when I saw Melissa playing outside with other kids. My heart leaped. It had been months since I'd seen her this close. She'd grown taller, her hair longer, wearing a pink unicorn dress. I dropped the broom and started walking toward her. "Melissa, sweetheart!" The little girl turned around, hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Hi, Grandma." I knelt down and held her small hands. "How are you, sweetheart? I've missed you so much." She threw her arms around me, and in that brief moment, I felt that love was still there. The bond between us hadn't completely broken. But then I heard a voice behind me. "Melissa, come here." Jacob and Patricia were walking down the sidewalk. Jacob's face was cold, and Patricia's eyes burned with annoyance. Melissa let go of me and ran toward them. Jacob took Patricia's hand and looked at me. "Mom, we've talked about this. You can't just show up like this to see Melissa." I froze. "Show up like this?" "She was right here on the street. I just said hello." Patricia stepped in, her tone sharp and icy. "Teresa, you really don't know how to respect boundaries. We've already made it clear you have to ask before you see Melissa." The neighbors started peeking out to watch. Mrs. Helen stood by her window. Mr. Martin stopped washing his car. My face burned with humiliation. "Sweetheart, I just wanted to see my granddaughter for a minute." Patricia let out a mocking laugh. Her words cut like a knife. "Your granddaughter? Teresa, you think just because you're the grandmother you can do whatever you want? Melissa is our daughter, Jacob's and mine, and we decide when you get to see her." I blinked, holding back tears. "Jacob, please say something." He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw a stranger, someone I no longer recognized. Then he opened his mouth, and every word was a blade. "Old lady, go live your own life. Leave us alone." Everything went silent. The children stopped playing. The neighbors held their breath. Even the wind seemed to stop. Old lady. My son had just called me that in front of everyone. I stood there, clutching the handle of my faded floral bag, the one I had sewn myself years ago. My eyes didn't cry, but they said everything. A part of me had just died. Jacob picked up Melissa and walked away. Patricia gave me one last look, triumphant, then followed him. I stood in the middle of that quiet street, surrounded by the pitying stares of everyone around, my shame burning through my skin. I went inside, closed the door, leaned against it, and finally let the tears fall. I cried harder than I had since the day I buried David. I cried for everything I'd given, everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd lost. But that night, when the tears ran dry and the pain turned into something else cold and sharp, I stood up, turned on the kitchen light, and opened the cabinet. On the top shelf, behind some old medicine boxes, there was a worn-out shoebox. I opened it. Inside were the pieces of my life, the tuition receipts for Jacob's 4 years of college, totaling $180,000. The documents from the sale of the apartment my mother had left me, my only inheritance, traded for my son's future, photos of me, younger, tired but smiling, and finally, the loan agreement for $95,000, signed by all three of us. I stared at those papers and made a cold, final decision. If they wanted me to go live my life, I would, but not in the way they imagined. I sat at the kitchen table all night, staring at every document, every photograph, the evidence of a lifetime of endurance. As the sky began to lighten, a strange calm came over me. Not anger, but resolve. I had spent my whole life living for others only to be met with contempt, betrayal, and humiliation by my own son. Enough. That morning, as the sun rose, a new Teresa was born. A woman who wouldn't cry, wouldn't beg, but would stand up. The first thing I did was stop calling Jacob. It sounds simple, but for a mother, it's the hardest thing to do. The instinct to check in, to reconnect, to forgive, it's powerful. But I stopped. I put my phone in a drawer and pretended it didn't exist. 3 days passed, then a week. Jacob called. I picked up, my voice calm and distant. "Hello. Mom, are you okay?" His voice sounded unfamiliar. "I'm fine. Do you need something? No, I just wanted to check on you. I'm fine. Is that all? Yeah, that's all. Good. Goodbye. I hung up. And for the first time in years, I felt in control. In the following days, I gathered every document, placed them in a clear folder, and went to find a lawyer, someone who specialized in family and debt law. That's how I met Valerie, a woman in her 50s with a small but trustworthy office. I told her everything from the apartment I'd sold, the tuition I'd paid, the loan, the car, to the day my son humiliated me. She listened quietly, then looked at me over her glasses and said, "Mrs. Teresa, you have a strong case." My heart pounded. This contract is legally binding. Since they defaulted, you can sue to recover the debt. With interest and inflation, the total comes to about $127,000, and if they refuse to pay, we can ask the court to seize their assets, including the car. I took a deep breath. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about reminding my son that his mother was not an ATM and that respect is not negotiable. "Do it," I said. Valerie smiled. "Good. I'll take care of everything." I left her office with my head higher, my shoulders straighter. For the first time in months, I wasn't a victim, I was taking action, but I also had another plan. I called my cousin Daisy in Lisbon. She had married a Portuguese man and lived there for 10 years. We only spoke on birthdays or Christmas, but this time, I called for a different reason. Her cheerful voice came through. "Teresa, what a surprise to hear from you. Daisy, I need a favor." I told her everything about Jacob, the humiliation, and my plan. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You'll always have a home here. If you want to come, our door is open. Remember when my mom was sick and you made baby clothes for me to sell for her medicine? I never forgot that. Now it's my turn to help you. Come here. Start over." I closed my eyes as tears of hope rolled down my face. "All right. But keep it a secret. Don't tell anyone." "Of course." My lips are sealed. I sat on the sofa, looking around my small house. These walls had seen my tears, my sweat, my aging. Now they would witness my departure. I began preparing. I sold old things, the sewing machine, the broken bookshelf, a few unused chairs. I posted them online and slowly gathered some cash. I donated clothes to charity, kept only what I needed, and packed it into a small suitcase. Every item I let go of made me feel lighter. Meanwhile, Valerie called. "Mrs. Teresa, I've filed the lawsuit. Your son will soon receive the court summons." My heart raced, a mix of fear and relief. 3 weeks later, I met with an accountant, Richard, a calm man in his 60s with thick glasses. He helped me organize everything: tax records, pension documents, travel papers. "How long do you plan to be away?" he asked. "I don't know. Maybe forever." He nodded, asked no more questions, and quietly continued working. I bought a ticket direct flight from New York to Lisbon, 1 week later. When I clicked confirm, my chest tightened. It was real now. I was leaving the country, leaving the son I had once loved more than anything, but he wasn't my son anymore. And I wasn't the same mother I once was. That last week, Jacob called twice. I spoke politely, but distant. I didn't mention the lawsuit, the trip, nothing. I just said I was fine, living my own life. He thought everything was normal. 3 days before the flight, Valerie called. "Mrs. Teresa, they've received the court notice." My stomach clenched. "What happens now?" "Now we wait. They'll try to contact you, but don't worry, I'll handle it." I didn't know if I was calm, but I was certain of one thing: I had made my choice. The night before I left, I wrote a letter. I tore it up and rewrote it 3 times. Every sentence had to hurt just enough, be honest enough, to set me free. When it was done, I folded it, sealed it in a white envelope, and wrote on the front, "To Jacob." I left it on the kitchen table. The next morning, I packed my small suitcase, looked around the house one last time: the kitchen where I'd sewn for decades, where I'd cried, and the small garden with the old apple tree. I locked the door, handed the key to Mrs. Helen, my kind neighbor, and said, "When Jacob comes, please give him this letter." Then I took a cab to the airport. When the plane took off and the sight of America grew smaller beneath the clouds, I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in 68 years, I was living for myself. And that wasn't selfish, it was survival. 10 hours in the air. I didn't sleep. I just stared out the window, watching the endless ocean below, thinking of what I'd left behind and what was waiting ahead. When the plane landed in Lisbon, the sun was just rising. My legs trembled as I stepped out, my heart pounding. Amid the crowd of strangers, fear flickered through me, but then I saw Daisy, standing at the arrivals gate, holding a handwritten sign with my name on it. When our eyes met, she dropped the sign and ran to hug me. The warmth of her embrace, the faint scent of her perfume, it made everything lighter. "Welcome, Teresa. Welcome to your new life." I broke down crying right there in the airport. The first few days in that foreign land were about relearning how to breathe, how to be free, how to be myself again. Daisy's house was small but cozy, tucked in a quiet suburb of Lisbon, with cobblestone streets and old stone buildings washed in the colors of time. She and her husband, Fernando, welcomed me as family. They gave me a small room with a single bed, a wardrobe, and a window, overlooking the backyard where an olive tree grew. I kept myself busy helping with meals, cleaning, taking walks around the neighborhood, but my thoughts still drifted back to America. I wondered what was happening there, if Jacob had read the letter, if he was looking for me. 3 weeks after I arrived, I got a call from Valerie. "Mrs. Teresa, I have news." My heart pounded. "What is it?" "A woman just contacted me. She said she used to work with Patricia and has important information for you." I frowned. "What kind of information?" She didn't say over the phone, only that it's about the money, the so-called investment. A chill ran down my spine. "Give me her number." Valerie, read it out. I took a deep breath and called immediately. A young, uneasy voice answered. "Hello? Hi, this is Teresa. My lawyer said you have something to share with me." There was a pause. Then she said softly, "My name's Jessica. I used to work with Patricia at the cosmetics store. I was fired 6 months ago, and I've been debating whether to say anything. I'm listening." I overheard Patricia bragging that the so-called smoothie franchise investment never existed. I froze. "What did you say?" "It never existed, Mrs. Teresa. I overheard her talking with some coworkers." She laughed, saying she'd convinced Jacob to lie so they could get money from you. She said they used it to remodel their apartment and buy a car. She even joked that you believed everything. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped the phone. Remodel the apartment? Yes. They redid the floors, installed new cabinets, renovated the bathroom, and bought that Corolla, all with your money. Patricia said it with total contempt, like you were a fool. I closed my eyes. The room spun. "Do you have proof?" "I do." I suspected she was trying to get me fired, so I recorded some conversations. One of them caught that discussion by accident. "I can send it to you. Please, send it." 5 minutes later, a message arrived. I plugged in my earphones and pressed play. Patricia's voice came through, loud and clear. "You wouldn't believe it. I got Jacob to ask his mom for 95 grand. Said it was for a smoothie business. And she bought it. Now I'm remodeling the whole apartment. It looks so fancy. Still had enough left for the car. At least that old woman was useful for something." Laughter erupted in the background. Then Patricia continued. "I'm telling you, mothers-in-law are annoying, but this one finally shut up. She's probably just sitting around waiting for her money. She'll never see it again." I took off the earphones and sat still on the edge of the bed, my hands gripping my knees. There had never been any investment. No business, nothing but lies. They had sat in my home, eaten my cake, smiled at me while betraying me the whole time. And Jacob? Did he know? Or had she manipulated him too? Then I remembered his words. "It's my money. I can do what I want with it." I remembered him calling me a loan shark. I remembered him shouting, "Old lady, go live your life." He knew. He knew everything. I called Jessica back. Can you send that recording to my lawyer? I'll give you her contact. Of course, Mrs. Teresa. And I'm truly sorry for what you've been through. I hung up and called Valerie right away, told her everything, and forwarded the recording. After listening, her voice was firm. This changes everything. This isn't just a civil matter anymore, it's fraud. No, I said immediately. I don't want criminal charges. I don't want my son in jail. I just want my money back with interest. And I want him to understand that what he did was wrong. Valerie sighed. I understand. We'll use the recording as civil evidence. They won't be able to deny it now. I sat quietly, staring at the white wall. The truth didn't break me. I'd already been broken long ago, but it gave me what I needed. Clarity. I hadn't lost my son because he'd been misled. I lost him because he chose to lose me. He chose greed. He chose betrayal. That night, I sat beneath the olive tree in the backyard, looking up at the sky. The stars here looked different, or maybe they'd always been the same, and it was me who'd changed. I cried, but it wasn't from pain anymore. They were tears of release. I finally understood that what I'd lost wasn't money, it was dignity. And I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since leaving America. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, the smell of coffee filled the house, and I knew I would be fine. Not because of the lawsuit, but because I had finally chosen the most important thing, myself. But before telling you how it ended. I need to go back to the day I left my old home and the letter I left behind. While I was in Lisbon finding peace and truth, another storm was brewing in America. 3 days after I left, Mrs. Helen called me. Teresa, your son came looking for you. He looked desperate, asking where you were, when you'd be back. I gave him the letter you left. He opened it right there on the street, read it, and his face turned pale. His hands shook. He knocked on my door, asked to call you, but I told him you'd gone and I didn't know when you'd return. He left, looking lost. I sat in silence, imagining it Jacob standing in the middle of the street, reading every word I wrote. In the letter, I had weighed each sentence carefully. I wrote, Jacob, if you're reading this, it means you finally remembered your mother. Whether it's because you're worried or because you need something, it doesn't matter. I'm not there anymore. I've spent 3 days thinking about what to say. I once wanted to scream, to accuse you, to list every sleepless night, every penny I sacrificed for you. But I'm tired. I no longer want to make things easy for you. Let me tell you a story. About a widow at 32, with a 6-year-old child, no job, no money, but who still stood up. She worked until her hands bled, skipped meals so her child could eat, sold the only apartment she owned your grandmother's to pay for your college tuition, $180,000, Jacob. That's the real price of the diploma, hanging on your wall. I believed in you more than anyone else, and you repaid me by turning your back, by lying, by using me like an ATM. You borrowed $95,000, saying it was for an investment. In truth, you remodeled your apartment, bought a car, and when I asked for repayment, you called me a loan shark. But the worst part wasn't the money, it was being humiliated by my own son in front of neighbors, being banned from seeing my granddaughter, being treated like a burden. You told me to go live my own life, and I listened. I left the country, moved somewhere new, started over at 68. Because I would rather be alone than live in humiliation. As for the money, I've sued you. With interest, it totals $127,000. You signed a contract. You will have to pay. If not, your assets, including the car you bought with my hard work, will be seized by the court. Don't look for me. Don't call. I've changed my number, deleted my social media, and cut all ties. You called me an old woman, fine. I am old. But now, I'm free. Free from your greed and your ingratitude. Remember this, Jacob. Whoever raises pigs shouldn't be surprised when the pen stinks. You made your choices, now live with them. As for me, I've chosen myself. Goodbye, Teresa. P.S. The college money, consider it the last gift from a foolish mother who once thought love could buy respect, but the $95,000 I lent you, I will take back, with interest. Mrs. Helen said that after reading the letter, Jacob stood frozen in the street for nearly 10 minutes, then ran to his car and drove off. He tried calling me, but my number was already deactivated. He searched online but found nothing. He asked the neighbors, and everyone said they didn't know. 2 days later, Valerie texted, "He's received the court notice, he has 15 days to respond." Jacob tried to get my number, but she refused and forwarded me his message instead. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please don't sue. Give me a chance to talk, we can work this out." I read it and didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. A contract is a contract, and consequences must follow. 2 weeks later, he messaged again, "Mom, I'll sell the car. I promise I'll pay you back, little by little. Just please come back. Melissa misses you." The name Melissa pierced my heart. I loved that child, but I couldn't keep sacrificing myself. I replied through Valerie, "Make payments as required, but between us, everything is over." And from that moment, Jacob's life began to crumble. The car was now worth less than $80,000, while he owed more than $127,000. When Patricia found out about the lawsuit, the letter, and the recording Jessica had given to my lawyer, she panicked. Valerie later told me that after receiving the court papers, Jacob and Patricia had a massive fight. Neighbors heard them yelling through the walls. Patricia accused Jacob of being weak, of letting that old woman humiliate them. Jacob shouted back, blaming her for inventing the fake investment. Their marriage started to collapse, and in the middle of all that, screaming was Melissa, my sweet granddaughter. She was only 6, forced to hear her parents fighting, missing the grandmother who used to hold her tight. Mrs. Helen called me, saying she'd seen Melissa crying at the gate, asking when Grandma Teresa would come back. I cried too, because it wasn't fair, because a child was paying for her parents' mistakes. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't return to being the easy mother, the one who kept lending, forgiving, and being treated as a nuisance. I wasn't that woman anymore. I had changed, not just because I lived in another country, but because I had changed from within. 3 months after leaving America, I received the news. Jacob had sold his car, borrowed from the bank, and paid the debt. $127,000 were transferred to my account. Seeing that number, I didn't feel happy or victorious. I just felt light, relieved that it was finally over, that I had set boundaries, that I had proven every action has a consequence. But beneath that relief was sadness, because that money came at the cost of the son I once loved more than myself. The following months were silent, heavy, filled with words unsaid. I stayed in Lisbon, learning to adjust, to build a new life, though news from home still reached me. My neighbor, Mrs. Helen, and my lawyer, Valerie, kept me informed. Jacob's life was falling apart. I couldn't deny that a small part of me felt vindicated, but another part ached deeply. One October afternoon, Mrs. Helen called, "Teresa, I saw your son yesterday. He was on the bus. I guess he sold the car. He looked awful thin, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, older by at least 10 years. I closed my eyes, my heart aching. Anything else? Word is, he took out a big loan to pay you back. He now pays about $3,200 a month for 4 years. It's tough, almost half his salary." I swallowed hard. "And Patricia?" She sighed. "Always yelling. I can hear them arguing through the walls. One day she screamed that she regretted marrying him, that he's a failure who ruined everything." Ruined everything, I thought. They hadn't lost everything. They'd only lost what was never theirs to begin with, my money. And Melissa? "She's so sad, Teresa." I saw her sitting alone in the park, not playing with other kids, just swinging quietly, staring into space. My heart shattered. Melissa wasn't to blame. She was just a child trapped between her parents' greed and cruelty. but I couldn't return to save them because if I did, who would save me? 2 weeks later, Mrs. Helen called again, her voice heavy. Teresa, Jacob, and Patricia got divorced. It was ugly. She took Melissa back to her mother's house, left Jacob alone, and is demanding a large amount of child support. I said nothing. He's alone now. Completely broke. Those words, alone and broken, were exactly what I had felt that day he humiliated me in the street. The only difference was that my solitude was chosen. His was earned. Since I left, has he ever asked about me? Yes, Mrs. Helen said. Every time he sees me, he asks, "Have you heard from my mom?" I just shake my head and tell him you said not to tell. He lowers his head and walks away. I hung up, my throat tight. That night, staring at the ceiling, I asked myself, did I do the right thing? The answer, though painful, was yes. Because if I had gone back, forgiven without consequence, everything would have been the same. Jacob would have kept using me. Patricia would have kept mocking me. And I would have kept shrinking in silence. I couldn't save my son, but I had saved myself. A month later, Valerie sent a message. Jacob wrote you a letter. He asked me to pass it on. Do you want to hear it? I took a deep breath. Read it. Her voice came through the phone, low and steady. Mom, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you don't care anymore. But I need to write, even if it's just to fill the silence. I ruined everything. When Patricia told me to ask you for money, she said it was just a small loan, that we'd pay it back quickly, that you'd never notice. I believed her, or maybe I wanted to believe her, because it was easier. Easier than working harder, easier than saving. Then, when we bought the car, fixed the apartment, and you started asking questions, I panicked. Instead of being a man, I hid. I treated you horribly. I humiliated you. And I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life. Patricia left me, took Melissa, called me a failure who destroyed everything. She's right, but not in the way she thinks. I didn't just lose my marriage or my money. I lost my mother, the woman who raised me alone, who sold her home so I could go to college, who never gave up on me even when life was hard. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I still have to say it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for insulting you, for calling you an old woman, for pushing you out of my life. You weren't the problem. You were the best thing I had. Melissa asks about you every day. I don't know what to tell her, because the truth is too shameful to say. I'm not asking you to come back. I know I lost that right. I just hope you're happy. Please live the life you talked about, because at least one of us deserves peace, and that person is you, Jacob. When Valerie finished reading, she waited. I wiped my tears. Thank you. But I won't reply. Are you sure? Yes. Because even though that letter is full of regret, it can't erase years of humiliation. It can't take back the words, "Old lady, go live your own life." Forgiveness doesn't mean returning. I can forgive in my heart, but I'll never go back. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Helen called for the last time. Teresa, your son moved out, left the apartment, rented somewhere cheaper. Couldn't keep up with the mortgage, the loan, the child support. He's truly penniless now. I stayed silent. And you know what? Yesterday I saw him, at the grocery store, buying bread and a few slices of ham. That's it. Remember? You used to do that to feed you both back in the day. I remembered well. Back then, I skipped meals to feed my little boy. Now, he was living the same way but because of his own choices. As for me, I was in Lisbon, eating grilled cod, sipping white wine, watching the sunset over the Tagus River. Not revenge, just consequence. Maybe that's what justice really looks like. 6 months had passed since I set foot in Portugal. 6 months since I left my old life behind. And I realized something. To start over, you don't need youth, you need courage. Lisbon embraced me in ways I never expected. At first, everything felt strange, the language, the cobblestone streets that hurt my feet, the cold that seeped into my bones. But little by little, this ancient city became home. Daisy introduced me to a group of Latin American expats living here. Every Thursday evening, we met at a small cafe in the Baisha district, drank coffee, ate pastries, shared stories, and laughed genuinely. 3 months later, I found a part-time job at a small embroidery workshop run by an elderly woman named Fatima, 75 years old. When she saw my stitching, she smiled. "You have golden hands," I replied. "I've been sewing my whole life." The pay was €800 a month, but it was mine earned honestly, owing nothing to anyone. I bought a few small things: a red wool coat, short boots, a silk scarf. I joined a senior walking club and became friends with Gloria and Armando, people who only knew me as Teresa, not someone's mother, not a shadow of the past. One day, while we were hiking up a hill overlooking the city, Armando turned to me and said, "Teresa, you have a beautiful smile. You should smile more often." I blushed. It had been so long since anyone said something like that. He invited me for coffee after the walk, and I said yes. It wasn't love, just companionship. And I felt peace, true peace, but life always finds ways to test us. One morning in November, Valerie called. "Mrs. Teresa, I just received a request. Jacob wants permission to speak with you in person." "I have to go back to America?" "Yes, just for a day. He says it's about Melissa. It's important." The name made my chest tighten. "Melissa? What happened to her?" He didn't say exactly, only that it's urgent. I sat frozen, the phone hot in my hand. Valerie added, "You don't have to do anything, but he seems genuinely desperate." I wandered around the house all day, my mind blank. Daisy watched me with concern. I told her everything. She stayed quiet for a while, then said, "You don't owe him anything. But if it's about the child, maybe you should listen." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, remembering every memory, every wound. I had sworn never to go back. But Melissa, the one innocent soul in all of this, might need me. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Valerie. I told her to let Jacob know that I agreed to meet him, but the conversation had to take place in a public setting, and she would be present. She nodded in agreement. I booked a round-trip flight to the United States just 3 days. When the plane landed at Los Angeles Airport, a wave of tightness gripped my chest. The air, the heat, the noise, all of it brought back memories, both beautiful and painful. But I hadn't returned to stay. I had come back to close a chapter of my life. We agreed to meet at a crowded cafe downtown in the afternoon, somewhere safe and open. I arrived early and saw Valerie waiting. "Are you ready?" she asked. I answered softly, "No, but let's do it." Jacob arrived 15 minutes later. The moment I saw him, my heart clenched. He looked thin, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes. He looked 10 years older than he should have. He froze when he saw me, his eyes glassy. "Mom!" His voice broke. I took a deep breath, didn't stand, didn't hug him, I just sat still. He walked toward me slowly, as if afraid to scare me, then sat down across from me. Neither of us spoke for a long while. The air was thick with silence. "Finally," he said, "thank you for coming. Finally, you're here." I didn't answer. He lowered his head, his voice trembling. "I don't even know where to start. I know I don't deserve this. I know I hurt you beyond forgiveness. But Melissa, Mom, she's not okay." My heart tightened. What's wrong with her? The therapist says she's depressed. She doesn't eat, doesn't play, barely speaks. She only asks about you. Every night before bed she says, "Daddy, where's Grandma?" And I don't know what to say. Tears rolled down his face. The teacher called me to the school. Melissa drew a picture, 3 people in it. Me, her, and you. She drew you with rout, gray hair and a smile, and underneath, she wrote, "I want Grandma to come back." My throat burned. The therapist says she needs emotional closure. She doesn't understand why you disappeared. She thinks she did something wrong. She thinks you don't love her anymore. I couldn't hold back my tears. Jacob continued, "I'm not asking you to come back to me. I know I lost that right. I'm just asking you to see her once, to tell her it's not her fault, to tell her you still love her. Please, she's in so much pain." I wiped my tears and looked into his eyes. For the first time, I saw a man truly remorseful. Where is she? With Patricia, at her mother's house, my ex-mother-in-law. Call her. Arrange it. I want to see my granddaughter. The next day, I met Melissa at a park near Patricia's house. Patricia brought her but stood at a distance, arms crossed against her car. Jacob came with me. When Melissa saw me, she froze for a moment, then suddenly ran. Her little legs moved fast, her eyes wide, hair flying behind her. "Grandma!" I knelt down, wrapping her tiny body in my trembling arms. The warmth of her hug broke something inside me, and tears spilled down my cheeks endlessly. "Grandma, you came back? You really came back?" "I came back, sweetheart. I came back." We held each other for what felt like forever. When I finally let go, I looked into her big brown eyes. "Melissa, I need to tell you something." I had to go away because sometimes adults argue, and they need time to calm down. "But this was never your fault. Do you understand? Never. But don't you love me anymore? I love you more than anything in this world. You've always been my precious girl, and that will never change." She hugged me again. We sat and talked and laughed for hours. When it was time to say goodbye, Melissa held my hand tightly. "Will you disappear again?" I swallowed hard. "I live far away, but we'll video call every week, okay? And one day, you'll come visit me. There are big airplanes that fly across the ocean. Where I live, there's the sea, old castles, and so many beautiful things." Her eyes lit up. "Really, Grandma? Really?" She smiled the purest smile I had ever seen. As I walked away, I looked back and saw her waving, Jacob standing beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. I knew I had done the right thing. I flew back to Lisbon the next day. When the plane took off, I didn't look back. After that, Jacob and I exchanged only a few messages, brief, polite. He sent photos of Melissa. I replied with a heart emoji. Between us lay a fragile peace, not quite forgiveness, not quite reconciliation, just closure. 6 months later, I donated half of the money I had recovered, around $63,500, to an organization that helps elderly people in need back in America. I kept the rest for my future, for uncertain days, because, for the first time in my life, I was thinking about myself. Now, at 69, I wake up early every morning, drink coffee with Daisy, go to the sewing workshop, talk with customers, and video call Melissa every week. I walk, share wine with friends, laugh, and truly live. And the most wonderful thing is, I am happy. Not perfectly happy. There are still nights when I miss the son I once raised, not the man he became. There are still tears sometimes. But each morning, when I open the window and see the sunlight warming the old brick walls of Lisbon, I know I've learned life's most precious lesson. Respect cannot be begged, it must be earned or let go. I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because I was strong. Strong enough to choose myself. Strong enough not to settle for scraps of affection. Strong enough to start over at 68, in a foreign land. And if you're listening to this story, if you're hurting, being disrespected by someone you love, remember this: you don't have to lose yourself to be loved. True love doesn't make you small, doesn't make you suffer, doesn't make you forget your worth. It's never too late to begin again. Because respect has no age, and dignity has no expiration date. Now, I'm living exactly the way my son once told me to: live your own life, but it's the life I chose, surrounded by people who truly value me. What about you? If you were in my place, would you forgive or keep your distance to protect yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every story holds a different truth, and maybe your experience will help someone else find their strength again. Don't forget to follow the channel to hear more real stories where we don't just listen, but learn how to heal, grow, and love the right way. Because in the end, we're all just trying to find our way home to a peaceful place within our own hearts.